At 83 years old, Bernie Sanders is doing something that no other American politician has been willing to do at the scale he is doing it. He is taking the fight directly to the people, not to the donors, not to the party insiders, not to the television green rooms. He is showing up in deep red districts, in working-class towns, in states where Democrats are not supposed to be competitive, and he is drawing crowds that would embarrass candidates half his age. And the plan he is laying out, piece by piece, rally by rally, Senate floor speech by Senate floor speech, is arguably the most comprehensive and confrontational opposition strategy that has emerged anywhere in American politics since Donald Trump returned to the White House. This is the full story of what Bernie Sanders is doing, why it matters, and whether it can actually work. The centerpiece of Sanders' strategy is the Fighting Oligarchy Tour, which he launched in February 2025 in Omaha, Nebraska, alongside Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. The stated goal from day one was to oppose what Sanders describes as the takeover of American government by a small number of extraordinarily wealthy individuals and the corporations they control. What happened next surprised almost everyone in the political establishment. The tour's first major stop drew large crowds in Nebraska and Iowa in the middle of winter. Then came a rally in Denver, Colorado that drew 34,000 people, a larger crowd than any event held by the Democratic Party at the time, and larger than any rally Sanders himself drew during either of his two presidential campaigns in 2016 and 2020. A week later, Los Angeles drew 36,000. Warren, Michigan, drew more than 10,000. A standing-room-only crowd packed the Capitol Theater in Wheeling, West Virginia, one of the reddest states in the country. By November 2025, the tour had drawn more than 261,000 attendees across multiple legs. Live streams of the rallies had been viewed more than 8 million times. What made the crowds even more significant was who they were made up of. Sanders reported that 2/3 of the people who registered to attend the events had never attended a Sanders event before and had never donated to him. Roughly a third of them were not registered Democrats at all. These were not the same progressive activists cycling through party events. These were new people, drawn by a message they had not heard delivered this directly, at this scale, aimed squarely at the people and policies they held responsible for the economic squeeze on their daily lives. And Sanders has been ruthlessly specific about who and what he is targeting. At every stop, he returns to the same set of facts delivered with the same plain-spoken fury. 3 men, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg, have a combined personal wealth of more than $900 billion. 3 people have more wealth than the bottom half of all Americans combined. Since Trump was elected, that wealth has surged further. Musk alone, whose companies hold nearly 100 federal government contracts worth approximately $8 million per day in government payments, was handed the reins of an unofficial government efficiency operation that proceeded to fire tens of thousands of federal workers, attempt to gut the Social Security Administration, cut Veterans Administration staff, and eliminate entire agencies, all while his own business interests were protected and expanded. Sanders has made this a single clean argument. Trump promised to fight for the working class, and then he handed the government over to the billionaire class, and the numbers back him up. Trump's signature domestic legislation, which Republicans have called the One Big Beautiful Bill, cuts Medicaid by $715 billion. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that cut would eliminate health insurance for more than 13.7 million Americans. It cuts nutrition assistance used by millions of working families. It cuts education funding. It cuts support for affordable housing. And it pays for all of those cuts primarily by extending and expanding tax breaks that flow overwhelmingly to the wealthiest Americans and the largest corporations. Sanders has said on the Senate floor and at every rally that this bill represents exactly why Americans have contempt for Congress. At a time when the richest people have never had it so good, Republican leadership is working overtime to make the billionaire class even richer. At a time when a majority of Americans are struggling to put food on the table and pay for health care, Republican leadership is making life even more difficult for working people.
But here's what distinguishes Sanders' current approach from what Democrats have typically done in opposition. He is not just making these arguments to Democratic base voters in safe blue districts. He is going into Republican-held districts, towns represented by Republicans who voted for these cuts and are up for re-election in November 2026, and he is standing in front of mixed crowds and asking Republican voters directly, why does your congressman think it is a good idea to cut your Medicaid while giving tax breaks to people who are already billionaires? His chief of staff, Misty Rebick, laid out the organizing mechanics of the tour in stark terms. Over the course of the tour, the campaign has organized thousands of people to attend rallies, canvasses, office visits, and town halls in swing districts across the country. More than 7,000 people have been recruited to run for office themselves. Notably, more than half of those recruits are running as independents rather than as Democrats, a detail that speaks to Sanders' long-standing argument that the two-party system itself has been captured by corporate money and is failing working people regardless of which party holds power. That argument is a direct challenge not only to Trump and the Republicans, but to the Democratic Party establishment itself. At a Rochester, Minnesota rally in May 2026, Sanders told the crowd of 1,300 that it is not good enough to say you are anti-Trump. He pointed to examples of a new political energy he sees emerging. Zohran Mamdani, a previously unknown New York State assemblyman, won the New York City mayor's race by building a grassroots movement that took on the Democratic establishment. In Maine, a progressive challenger forced out the establishment Democratic candidate for Senate. In California, petitioners are working to put a billionaire wealth tax directly on the ballot through a citizen initiative. Sanders' policy agenda is equally detailed and equally direct. He is calling for Medicare for all, a single-payer universal health coverage system that would eliminate the insurance industry's role in deciding who gets care. He is calling for raising the federal minimum wage to at least $17 an hour, a living wage that reflects actual costs of housing, food, and transportation in the modern American economy. He is calling for expanding Social Security by lifting the payroll tax cap, meaning that wealthy Americans would pay into Social Security on all of their income rather than stopping contributions once their earnings cross the current threshold. He is pushing the PRO Act, federal legislation that would make it significantly easier for workers to organize and join unions by eliminating many of the tactics corporations currently use to suppress union drives illegally. He is calling for a federal moratorium on new artificial intelligence data centers until safeguards are in place to protect workers from the mass job displacement that he and many economists see coming.
On artificial intelligence specifically, Sanders has been stark. He wrote in a widely read op-ed that AI is the most transformational technology in the history of the world, and that if Congress does not act now to ensure it benefits everyone, rather than just a handful of billionaires racing for power and profit, the result will be the same as past technological shifts that were promised as opportunities for working Americans and delivered instead as tools to eliminate their jobs and concentrate wealth at the top. He pointed to self-driving Waymo cars already operating in 10 cities, driverless 18-wheelers on Texas highways, and warned that the displacement of workers in transportation, warehousing, retail, and customer service is not a distant future scenario. It is already underway. The political strategy behind all of this is built on a specific theory of the 2026 midterms. Republicans currently hold a narrow majority in the House of Representatives. Many of the seats in that majority are held by members representing districts that are genuinely competitive. Those members voted for cuts to Medicaid, cuts to food assistance, and tax breaks for the wealthy. Sanders' team has made a deliberate decision to go into those districts, stand in front of those voters, and make those votes the central question of the November election. His chief of staff said directly, the big, beautiful bill must be the defining issue of the 2026 campaign, and no member of Congress who voted for this legislation should be reelected. Whether that strategy succeeds depends on several factors that are not yet resolved. Democrats are currently overperforming in special elections across the country by margins that, if sustained through November, would flip the House. But special elections often reflect protest energy that does not fully translate to general election results. And the question of whether Sanders' message can reach and move the specific voters in competitive Republican districts rather than simply energizing already committed progressives remains the central test of the tour's political effectiveness. What is not in dispute is that Sanders has found something that no other figure in American politics has managed to find in this moment. A one-sentence summary from a political researcher at the American Economic Liberties Project put it this way: Bernie Sanders launched an anti-oligarchy tour, and it is the only thing that has popularly resonated within the Democratic Party base. That is fascinating and notable. At 83 years old, the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress is not standing aside. He is on a stage in front of thousands of people in West Virginia and Iowa and Michigan and Minnesota, pointing at the structure of wealth and power he has spent decades describing, saying the structure is now visible to everyone, and asking the same question he has been asking his entire public life: whose side are you on? The answer, at least in the crowds that keep showing up, appears to be coming in loud and clear.